everyone, and welcome to the Unlearning Talks series of the Start Create Cultural Change event. The Unlearning Talks is a series of talks on resilience and sustainability in the sociocultural sector, with a particular focus on Southeastern Europe. My name is Maria Luisa Laupodi. I'm speaking to you from Thessaloniki in Greece, and I will be your host for this online event. This event is part of the START program. START is a capacity building and fellowship program for aspiring cultural managers from Greece. The program supports creative minds to kickstart cultural initiatives that generate positive social impact on their local communities. This year, the START program has again supported 30 cultural managers from Greece by offering a professional placement in 30 different sociocultural centers in Germany. 15 of those cultural managers have moved forward, and with the program support, they have implemented their innovative initiatives in 9 cities around Greece until June 2020. I would like to take you through this journey with a short video we have prepared. The START program is coming to a conclusion this year. And while thinking how we would like to conclude, we understood that a lot of the work that had been developed in the projects we supported could be relevant to other areas in our region. And similarly, other projects could have a lot to share with our community. So we designed this series of talks to spread beyond Greece and Germany and in the Southeastern European space, as very often challenges remain the same when working towards sustainable cultural interventions. The Unlearning talks evolve around 3 thematic cycles. Cycle 1, coping with emerging crises, challenges and trends. Cycle 2, resilient models of sociocultural entrepreneurship. And cycle 3, building new collaborative methods of cooperation and networks. Each cycle spans over 3 days, from Tuesday to Thursday every week. And every day there is a different topic and a very rich lineup of speakers from Southeastern Europe. For more information, you can visit the startgreece.net website. You as an audience can ask them any question you wish by downloading the Slido app, either on Google Play or the App Store. The event code on Slido for our event is #21067. So let me take you through the program. Today's talk is part of the second cycle and is entitled Transformation of the Media Landscape in the Region. Is it doable? According to a survey by the World Economic Forum about media consumption during COVID-19 lockdown, 80% of people said that they are more likely to be willing to pay for subscription to access online cultural platforms and media outlets than before the pandemic. Could this shift in media consumption be the beginning of changing the media landscape in the region? 3 representatives of independent media operating within the region will discuss whether they can come out of the COVID-19 pandemic stronger than before. When designing the series of talks, we initially considered independent media as a horizontal force in society, yet at a closer look, and through the total chaos of information during the COVID-19 crisis, we came to the conclusion that their work is mostly vertical and parallel to the work of other social and cultural initiatives. The complexity of making people understand is bigger than expected, although societies have developed very much. And probably we need to unlearn how to produce and consume information. Our speakers will dive into this shifting reality. Before we go into more details, I would like to welcome our international sign language translator, Apostolis Margaritidis. The shift to online events offers the possibility to more people to access the content from different locations. In our efforts to be as inclusive as possible, we believe that offering such interpretation can widen the audience and the dialogue for cultural development. We will start with the presentations of our three speakers and then continue to the Q&A. This part of the Q&A is participatory by design, as you, the audience, can join by sending to us your questions and comments. Moving forward, I would like to welcome the speakers of the sixth Unlearning talk. Stefan Gentroulescu from E-Zeppelin, Romania. Elvira Jukić Muykić from Media.ba, Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Fanis Kollias from Solomon in Greece. Welcome to all of you. It is a real honor to have representatives of independent media in our series of talks, as we believe that your work has a massive impact on how societies interact and develop. So let us start with the first speaker, Elvira Jukić Muykić. Over the past 12 years, Elvira has been working as a journalist, an editor, researcher, media trainer, project coordinator, and has collaborated with many media and non-governmental organizations in Bosnia and Herzegovina and internationally. She's one of the active and engaged media experts and analysts, and she has significantly contributed with her work in the development of educational materials and training for journalists, as well as in the field of ethical media reporting in the sphere of human rights and sensitive groups such as reporting on human trafficking and gender-based violence. Elvira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria Luisa. Hello, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. So, in short, what we do in Media Center Sarajevo, Media.ba, which I edit, is part of Media Center Sarajevo. What we do in Media Center Sarajevo is that we analyze, discuss, and educate the media and the wider publics about the media and about media freedom and professional standards. And we also, for example, reach out to wider audiences by working with young people on boosting their media literacy. Media Center Sarajevo is recognizable in the Western Balkans because in the past 25 years, this organization participated in shaping up of all major media policies and strongly supported and continues to support professional and socially responsible journalism. It is exactly that I think that we should do this now more eagerly than ever before, because journalism is changing and the concept of media is expanding every day, and the very idea of what and how should we best use our skills, knowledge, and intellect to improve our societies as journalists is in a way getting blurred in all of this situation, specifically with new generations of people who are working in media profession. With new technologies and new generations of media consumers, it is very easy to get lost or get stuck or lose sight of what makes our professional mission. Meanwhile, our governments are unfortunately getting more and more corrupt, and our business environments are getting weaker. And while we are seeing and trying to work here in Southeast Europe and in the Western Balkans, we're seeing and trying to work around the issue of migration from African and Asian countries. We are also facing at the same time an increased migration of especially young people from our region, who are also going to Western Europe and elsewhere where they're more developed parts of the world. So the professional media outlets have full hands of work in order to show all these problems we have in our societies. However, in order to survive, majority of media outlets are facing hard choices. Unfortunately, the results of those choices often are that they submit their editorial decision-making to the interests of those who fund them. And in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it is similar in the rest of the region of the Western Balkans, many media outlets, especially the mainstream, are, when you look at their contents, not sufficiently critical towards the authorities, which is enabling those in power to do actually whatever they want without pressures from the public. So to conclude on this part, I would say that majority of media are dependent on state incentives, There are many research to show this that we have done in Media Center Sarajevo, which means that those who hold the power and the institutions, they do get to decide where the money goes, and this translates into media losing their sharpness. Meanwhile, a few years ago, just to have a different perspective on this whole issue, a few years ago, one of the research projects in Media Center Sarajevo was about, we tried to map good examples of professional and independent and accountable media outlets in the region. And we did so not just in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but in neighboring countries too. And actually it turned out that all of them are funded mostly through grants from international donors. The financial possibilities of citizens at the same time are insufficient, even though to support investigative and independent media, even though we see that people desperately actually need media to fight against all these irregularities that trouble them every day. According to global surveys, as you mentioned, people during the lockdown, they said that they would be willing to pay for online cultural platforms and media outlets. Could this shift in media consumption be the beginning of changing of media landscape in the region? Well, definitely I believe that it could, but I have to be honest that realistically this shift that we're trying to talk about, at least in these small and poor markets that we come from here in the Western Balkans, these shifts will be extremely slow to replace these existing financial models. And the question is, what do we do in the meantime? Of course, I would like to hear others. What do you think? Transformation of the media landscape is, of course, doable. It is not just doable; it is necessary and it's inevitable. But it could turn into many directions, as you are all aware of. And this is why I think that civil society organizations need to be loud and get even louder in shifting these directions. For example, a very short example, in the last 6 months during the COVID lockdown and all these crises, many governments tried to, actually they did impose different measures to solve the whole situation. And obviously one of the key concerns was lack of ventilators in hospitals, as elsewhere in other countries, of course. And one of the entity governments in Bosnia and Herzegovina announced they are buying 100 of ventilators from China. It turned out, to be short, that the whole import deal was much pricier than the prices on the market, and it was all done by the import was done by an agriculture company which usually produces fruit and doesn't do any imports. But the owner was somehow connected to the prime minister and so on. So this was published in one of the media outlets, the mainstream, the daily news portals, and details about this were shared in spontaneously joined forces of several news portals. Not just the usual investigative journalists worked on this, but I'm sure you all recognize what I mean by daily news portals. They are publishing just mostly updates on what are the current events. And in this very situation, all of them joined their forces and actually did some investigative journalism. And the public was, of course, enraged by this whole situation. And these media outlets, they were seen as doing a heroic job. What I want to say with this example is that media are capable of recognizing their role, and they are capable of using their force when the citizens needs them to do so. And it is when the people, including journalists, see on such only when the people see on such examples that this is for the good of everyone, then the perspectives might change. What was this all about if it wasn't social impact that we are trying to talk about today? So to conclude, I think that we need to work harder to shift this idea of a journalist being someone who bothers the society, which exists now, but rather to shift it towards the opinions that it's someone whom we all need to clean what is under the carpet or hidden behind shiny faces of those who promise protection of national interests or whatever is trendy among populists nowadays. This is just a short introduction, and I hope that we will discuss more important related issues throughout this discussion.
Thank you very much, Elvira. It was actually a very condensed and very interesting positioning for giving our audience an overview of what you're doing and what's your role in society. It's actually more than one would expect from a media, let's say, let's put it simply, because you also have the educational part, as I understood. So we will get back to that in the Q&A, I am sure. Thank you. I would like now to invite the next speaker from Romania. Stefan Gentroulescu is an architect, curator, and critic, partner and editor-in-chief of Zeppelin magazine. He teaches at the Ion Mincu University of Architecture and Urbanism in Bucharest. He's the author or co-author and co-editor of 13 books and several exhibitions and research projects. Awards for the Zeppelin team include the finalists of the European Public Space of the year 2011, several prizes and nominations within national architecture exhibitions, the Romanian Pavilion for 2006 Venice Architecture Biennale. He's going to present to us how Zeppelin operates and what are his future plans. Stefan, welcome. You can start the presentation.
Thank you, Maria-Louise. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very honored to be in this panel with such courageous colleagues and organizers. I'll try to be short. Maybe it's a little bit strange that I speak about architecture and design without showing any images, but I think that maybe the images or sex images are not as important now. We are a platform for architecture and urban culture, also both technically and socially oriented. And the backbone of the whole Zeppelin project is the magazine. And the magazine in itself is actually made of two poles. It's a site which is with free access, E-Zeppelin. And then there's a bookazine, so a magazine which appears 4 times a year, more like an album, and which is, of course, a print magazine. We try to make this very strange business model. Usually when you have this kind of art magazines, you have to buy the content, the written content, the printed content, and then the website is more for promotion. But we say we will put the content for free on the website. But if you want something structured, if you want something beautiful, if you want something that you can keep, you have these magazines which are books in the same time. And then very soon we started the magazine 20 years ago, but very soon we started to build up this platform. And I will not repeat what you said about us, but we are basically orchestra people. And I think that in this field of architectural publishing and in the Balkans, we have to be orchestra people. That means playing the trombone in the same time, the flute, and then banging the drums with one hand and playing the guitar with another. So I also today I'm here at this conference, but I also had to write for the magazine. I have to write an advertorial for our sponsors. I have to talk at school and so on. And what we wanted from the start was to be independent. And this means also to be, of course, editorially independent, but also financially independent. We have one huge advantage, I think, when we speak about journalism or cultural journalism, is that being in architecture, of course, we talk about buildings a lot. So you can get sponsors advertising out of this construction field, which allows us to have like 80% of the budget from these private sources and only 20% from different cultural applications. But which also means that you have to balance, you'll have to keep your content pure. You don't have to mix advertising with the editorial. And sometimes you have to refuse advertising if it's from somebody that you could not possibly support. and it's not always easy. We have this advantage, but it's also a disadvantage. We are in a field in Romania in which I think it resembles a lot outer Balkanic countries, in which normal, let's say, media has gone down a lot in quality and also in public interests. And in which there are lots, the best media is actually done, and I'm not speaking about us, I'm speaking now about journalism, exactly like Elisa, is done by independent outlets, people who turned their back to the more corrupt papers or politically involved papers and started their own platforms and are living more or less through the subscriptions of their of people who read them, or let's say they find an important backer. And well, I think that I'm not here to talk a lot about architecture, but rather about culture and independent journalism. Of course, the pandemic hit us very hard because, like everybody, the consumption of books plummeted in Romania by about 30%. Advertising also plummeted. We are waiting also problems in construction. So I think we have to reinvent a bit ourselves, all of us. And maybe we should discuss today what you can do. I think that to diversify even more is inevitable. I think that we have to strike partnerships among ourselves, at least for the content and for helping each other. And for the rest, if I would refer to the beginning question of this gathering, at least for architecture and design, I'm totally pessimistic about having paying content on the site, because most of the people can find this content for free. So what they would pay and what they would be interested is actually the critical part, and not just taking press releases and fancy photos. And they're not really prepared to do it. I think it's more of a job of getting them to read before making them pay. So I think that probably we'll have to adjust anymore and to have maybe all of us this kind of daytime job in which you prepare events, in which you write editorials, in which you do this kind of backbreaking commercial things in order to keep afloat the organization and making it develop further. I really think that getting sold to a bigger media company is actually the beginning of the end. In most cases, when you're not relevant financially, you are kept maybe for the emblema, for the polishing of the image. But as soon as problems are starting to get bigger, you are the first thing to be dropped. So I think that independence is somehow not something that will remain a choice for all of us, but I think it's the only way forward, or it's just quicker or later disappearance. But I think we are all waiting for a very nice and very interesting period ahead. Maybe we'll speak about it later.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you also for being honest and open about your views on the different topics around your work. Actually, this shift in operational models is really the spot for our Q&A session, and we will get back to that. The last presentation now is from a speaker in Greece, Fanis Kollias. Fanis is the founder and co-owner of Solomon, an Athens-based independent and non-profit media organization that focuses on human rights defense and social inclusion by using journalism and media production as tools. Fanis has long experience in advertising, journalism, and event management, as well in the non-profit sector, and he will speak to us about Solomon's work and the landscape in Greece. Fanis, please share with us your presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Maria Luisa and the whole STAR team for inviting me to this panel. I'm Fanis Kollias. I'm the founder and content editor of Solomon, an Athens-based independent and non-profit media organization. I would like to start by giving you a short overview of the media landscape in Greece, and then to continue with Solomon's position in this landscape. In order to do that, I would like to use Reuters Institute's Digital News Report for 2020, and I'm going to focus actually on 3 specific facts. The first one is that 92% of Greeks choose to get their news from the online media, including social media, which is high enough considering the fact that the country has only 73% of internet penetration. Fact 2, which is the ambitious one. We have an increase of 4% to the online paying readers. Last year was 7%, and this year is 11%. And fact 3, the most important one for me, is that almost a third, 28% of Greek audience trust the news in total, and 30% trust the media they choose to get the news from. On the same fact, I have to also mention that according to the same report, online media brands with the highest readership in Greece have the lowest score in trust, which is insane. People do not trust the media they choose to get the news from. And this actually was very obvious during COVID-19 lockdown. And unfortunately, it continues by having multiple media outlets at the moment spreading fake news and conspiracy theories all day long. But now, what's Solomon's position in this media landscape? Solomon is an independent, as I told you, media organization and migration and refugee focus oriented. We do not cover the news, meaning what is happening right now, but we connect the dots and create stories under 3 main disciplines: investigative stories, interdisciplinary, and inclusive. That means that even if we have exclusive information about a topic, we do not care about publishing it first, rather than forming the perfect team that will investigate it holistically and create an accessible multimedia story to give the whole picture on the topic. Part of this editorial policy is our Media Labs, which is an activity that we started when I took part in the START program back in 2016, where we connect our graduates with the actual production of our outlet. Through Media Labs, actually, we train both locals and migrants and refugees in media production, filmmaking, photography, and storytelling. And this is actually what makes Solomon unique. And that's why I believe independence is good, but not enough. And this is what we ask from the people to support through our membership model. After research on membership and subscription models of many actually other mainly European media outlets, we did our first attempt to launch our membership model back in March 2020. However, we never imagined the COVID-19 consequences, and we actually never launched it, at least not properly. So we waited, and this summer the famous crowdfunding platform of Kickstarter, the journalist department of Kickstarter, approached us and asked Solomon to be one of the first projects that will launch its campaign along with the Kickstarter's startup operations, which is in less than 2 weeks from now. The date of Kickstarter launch in Greece is October 6th, so it's the date of Solomon's membership model launch. Our aim through this campaign is not to raise funds, but to attract as many backers as possible who, after the campaign, will become our recurring members. Solomon publishes both in Greek and English, with English as the primary language. That attracts a big audience from abroad, which makes us ambitious about our membership model. And I will actually like to continue about the consequences of COVID-19 through the Q&A process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fanis. It is really insightful to see the report data. You've all mentioned important data. So moving forward to the questions, let me remind you that you can participate as an audience in the conversation by sharing any questions or comments to our speakers through the Slido app. You can download the app either through the Google Play or the App Store. The event code is #21067. You can also participate through the Facebook live stream. I would like to start our Q&A with a point about the sustainability. You've all mentioned it is part of our cycle, the entrepreneurial models, that things are shifting. I would like to start with Elvira. As you mentioned that you did the research, if I got it right, in the funding schemes or the sustainability schemes of various independent media. And I would like to know a little bit more, because if I understood right, all three of you have a different operational model. So there is the funding by big organizations, then there is a subscription model or advertising. So I will go through all of the models and see what we have in common and what is shifting actually. So Elvira, please.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago, and it was actually the other way around. The research was mapping the independent and good media, examples of good media, like professional media. And then when these examples were mapped, it turned out that all of their financial models are actually, so it was the other way around. It wasn't a research about funding models, but the other way around. The research mapped the good examples of media, and all of them turned out to be financed through different grants and donors. And actually, this is just telling of what is the situation with independent media in the Western Balkans. Also, that doesn't mean that all of these good examples of professional independent media in the Western Balkans are just not trying anything, and some of them are also involved in starting campaigns like Solomon to crowdfund some of the funds from the citizens. But actually, it's not enough. It's not enough for, like, it's not a model that can be used as the only model. It can be combined with other models. So if media it's almost by a rule, if media is an independent and professional media in the Western Balkans, it has to be funded by international donors. And also in the recent years, at least in Bosnia and Herzegovina, international donors are also backing private and commercial media with different projects. So it's, I didn't mention it before, but advertising revenues and the size of the advertising market in Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's shrunk by at least a half in the last 10 years. So the money that is available for all the media, and there's a lot of media outlets in Bosnia and Herzegovina for such a small country. So there is a large number of media, and there is a very limited amount of funds that is available on the advertising market. So even the private media, the commercial media, they're turning to international donors. Mm-hmm. So they're also trying to mix. Even some of the biggest media outlets here in Bosnia and Herzegovina, they are admitting that 70% comes from advertising, from revenues, from different earnings and sales, but 30% is coming from some of them, not all of them, of course, but 30% is coming from some sort of donors. What is an additional and a very specific problem in Bosnia and Herzegovina is that government institutions, public institutions are significantly funding the media through different, not just grants, but different advertising contracts and tenders. So, for example, on a very small level, but it's very telling of the whole situation, a local media is more or less living off some kind of funds that it gets from the municipality. So what is this? What is the nature of this funding? The mayor, the local mayor, for example, he wants to be present on local television and to speak about his achievements, you know, and there is a from this very public institution of the municipality, there is a call for local media to sell their services of following the work of the local mayor or the local authorities. And by rule, it doesn't say in the tender you have to be positive about the mayor, you shouldn't be critical, but it goes without saying that it turns out to be the very rule. But so these are the examples we are trying to talk about, we're trying to analyze, we're trying to point at, and we're trying to research in order to tell the public what to tell the citizens that they should make a connection between an interview in their afternoon program they see on their local television and the very financing of the media, and why isn't this interview including some critical questions about the road not being built and so on. So it's a long shot, it's a long process, but as I said earlier, I think that this part of civil society should be even louder in telling the citizens why is it important for media to be kind of fighters for against all these irregularities.
Thank you, Elvira. I will get back to that. I have made a note actually on this part of collaborations because Stefan mentioned this, and it is a very important, let's say, possibility for the moment. I would like to ask Fanis now. There is the your operational model, is it based on grants? And if not, you know, are you planning at least in the upcoming work with the Kickstarter campaign to have, as Elvira said, a combined model?
Solomon's operation model is already combined since 2017. We have an agency. We produce multimedia content. We offer services actually of photography and filmmaking to other organizations, mainly non-profit organizations. And of course, you know, COVID-19 has affected a lot this production branch of Solomon, because we mainly cover events. And as you know, no one is having events since March 2020. So yeah, our model is already combination grants from international donors. Mm-hmm. is our primary source of income, of course. And now we are going to do this, you know, this effort with a membership model. It's not very usual in Greece. The last few years, some small-scale organizations have tried something similar. However, they are publishing only in Greek language, which is one very important issue. Greek audience is not very familiar, or at least 3 or 4 years back, they were not very familiar with membership models and subscriptions. Mm-hmm. Now the research, as I presented earlier, shows that we have an increase in that, and it's actually logical for me, especially the last years, the latest years. We can see the flow of the media narratives in Greece. Social media have helped a lot on that. So I think it's a very good opportunity at the moment for these small-scale media organizations to, you know, take advantage of the whole discussion about media landscape in Greece and, I don't know, try different operation models because they are needed. And this is the moment to actually, you know, play and make some experiments with different business models.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Talking about audiences and languages, I would like to ask Stefan about the international and local audience. So how does it work for E-Zeppelin, and how do you think it's going to affect you in the coming stages because of all this shift and so on? So how can you capitalize in a way on the existing audience, or if you think that there is a possibility for other kinds of audiences? Your microphone, I think, is muted.
Sorry. I think that in this respect, I'm much more to the side of Elvira in this sense, because our main audience is Romanian. And we're doing this for almost from the beginning. We are having this English version, and I think you have to look at it as a kind of, into brackets, in investment, which means that it doesn't bring you as much revenue, because normally advertisers are not really interested in international content. They are interested in the local market. And but it brings you, even if you touch a slighter audience, this audience is important because at least you're getting out. And I think that getting out, especially when you are from the Balkans, with our not so big countries and not such a big voice on the international scene, I think this is very important. So even if you have a very small audience for your English version, no matter what you're doing, I think this audience is extremely important. What we are doing now, we started before COVID, and this is a big step, and it's quite emotional, is that we really built up recently this international distribution. So we're trying to get it distributed with a print magazine internationally, and we really hope it works. It's actually, we all have to acknowledge that we have a niche audience, and I think that is extremely important. Is on the one hand you have to widen it, but without losing the quality and the let's say also the ethical part of what we are doing. But I think we have to acknowledge it and also try maybe pragmatically to get funding for it. For us, for instance, advertising works even if of course we don't reach the millions of people generalist media reaches. But we can tell them that we have a professional audience or a cultivated audience, or we tell them that there are people with some financial means, which is not always, of course, the case. And then they are interested, even if you're not as omnipresent as the others. I think that in the end, quality is our biggest asset. Quality and honesty in what we are doing, and the moment you lose that, it's very hard to get back to it. So I think that's the things you should capitalize on. And the English version is absolutely essential because you have to get to other like-minded people in other countries, and to at least to become a voice for your country, and to bring together our voices for this more progressive attitude towards a lot of things, especially in such conservative countries as ours all are still, and in a moment which is, I think, very, very problematic, and not just because COVID. So it's a duty, in a sense, to have this English version, no matter what you do, even if you're making theater production in only your national language, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. I think the idea, let's say, of the language and how you convey messages is very, very important. And that brings me to two topics, and I have already, I'm receiving already some questions from our audience, which I'm trying to connect now all together. There is a point about the education, because you, Stefan, are in education, higher education. I'm not sure if I understood if the organization or the magazine is...
Architecture University, I mean, but it's completely different from the magazine.
Okay, so there's no education, like workshops from the magazine. Any
sometimes they are. Actually, I talk about being orchestra people, all of us. But even if you try to handle 10 instruments in the same time, and maybe not all of them quite as good, at least you know the notes generally. And I think this also overlaps. For me, it would be impossible to do these jobs if they wouldn't overlap. For instance, we make an exhibition, we do the design for this exhibition, or we do it with our partners. Sometimes we get people, students involved, of course, as volunteers in this project. Sometimes we publish works from students. It doesn't have to be my students. They can be from very far away. So actually, every activity infuses somehow the others, and they overlap in a very, very strong way. But of course, you'll have to keep. You'll have also to keep things apart. I'm not mixing in any administrative way the magazine, which is independent, with the architecture school. I try to support the school as far as I can. I sometimes have co-production with books with the architecture school without any kind of funding from them. But it's not. I think that some things should be. You should help, but you should not. But you should keep them quite apart. And I don't have any function in the school. I think if I had any higher function in the school, I would have to quit the magazine, in all honesty.
Yeah, it's important. Transparency is important because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. And independence, as you mentioned. So let me go to a question we received on Slido for Elvira, and the question is, are there any workshops to learn how to spot, for example, fake news? You told us that there are educational workshops, and this is very important. And Fanis mentioned this, and I will get to this in a minute, how to take the time to collect the right information and diffuse it. And this is also has to do with the impact. So you mentioned, Elvira, a generational difference and shift. So this is where I would like us to go because the audience seems to be interested in that. So education for now, workshops.
Yeah, thank you. So how to spot fake news? There are plenty of things also online for a while now, not just during COVID situation, but especially now. What we have done in the past several years, when it was obvious that fake news is spreading much faster than before, because it's actually much easier now to start a news portal and to, you know, just take 2 days. You don't have to be a journalist. You just have to have $50 and set up a website to fill in some copy paste materials and so on, and you're good to go, right? And then you can do whatever you want to do with this content. But at the same time, for years now, there are many fact-checking organizations, fact-checking platforms who are trying to teach people, and it's a two-sided sword actually. They're trying to teach people that there is actually fake news, there is disinformation. But what on the other side of this the same coin is that some people take it very literally, and they don't trust the media. The trust in the media is getting lower. So I'll just go back to the question that one of the viewers asked, is how to spot fake news. There are my contacts are available, right, for everyone. If you want to contact me, I can give out some recommendations, not just in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but there are many different platforms that are offering, and there is a lot of kind of educational content you can find on your own. But what we have done in the past year is that we went beyond working with just journalists. We in Media Center, we organized something that we called youth camps, where we gathered young people from not journalists, not students of journalism, but just young people who are students or don't necessarily have to be students, but who are interested in exactly the questions that this viewer had, how to spot fake news and how to fight disinformation, how to kind of live in this very new environment that we are facing. I mean, we cannot, rarely anyone can imagine their lives now without consuming some kind of media content. And it's very, very important to talk about media literacy, and that is how to actually, especially when we are talking about these very sensitive and very kind of dangerous situations, such as health concerning situation like this pandemic. And among all these youth camps and all these workshops that we had with young people, we also developed something that we called like a handbook on the principles, not just principles, but basics of journalism. And one of the workshops that I did with these young people is try to present them different journalistic forms and what should a professionally done journalistic form of news, analysis, interview, etc. What should they look like? I know it sounds boring. We tried to keep it as short as possible, but what we try to do is to say, if you don't have a source telling the information, if you don't have an author, if you're looking at this news piece on a website that doesn't have bylines, that you're not clear who is the editor, who are the authors. These are some of the basic things that go in when you're teaching about how to spot fake news. So what we wanted to say is, this is the type of websites you would find fake news on. This is the type of content it looks like if you don't have any source, or if the source is not named so many times about very scandalous things. You should kind of develop more critical thinking and so on. So there are different even online trainings and workshops on how to spot fake news. It's a very, very important thing for all of us. Even some journalists, unfortunately, I can see that even though they're working as professional journalists, sometimes I see them, some of my colleagues sharing, very suspicious content on their Facebook pages, which is kind of showing that it's a problem that not only concerns, how to say, common citizens, but also people who are working as professional journalists. So it's not easy, but it's manageable. It's very necessary to educate oneself.
Thank you. I'm sure that thank you for sharing your contacts. We will do so for anyone who wishes to get in contact with you, Elvira. And I have a similar question for you, Fanis, on education. You mentioned the labs. I do remember the starting of the lab, Solomon Labs. And please, can you tell us a bit more about the labs, and if you also have some specific workshop or talk about fact-checking in the research process?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we start the educational trainings through START in 2016-17. We had a complete different approach back then, which was actually teach some basic skills and then, leave the graduates do whatever they want. And it didn't work, of course. It didn't work. On the second training program, we tried to put them in the actual production of magazine. It works, not always. It depends a lot on the interest that the students have on actually producing journalism. However, what we have noticed is that, they all have the basic interest. However, when it comes to actual work, actual production, actual research, fact-checking, as Elvira said, it's not an easy job. It takes a lot of time. It requires a lot of time. So many people do not have the patience to fact-check it, unfortunately. So that's why it's so easy to spread fake news. Now, what we're planning to do, and it's actually starting within October, it's the next cycle of our educational program. Actually, since March, we have changed completely our editorial processes. That means that we have become a monothematic online media outlet, which invests time on long-term investigative reports. Back in March 2020, we started a project that is called Last in Line and is focused on single migrant and refugee men in Greece, the life of single men. The reason behind this is that our community has many actually single men. The 40-something% of the asylum seekers since 2015 are single men. The rest is families, kids, and women, which is a huge number. However, we have noticed that there are no integration and inclusion programs for single men. There are multiple programs for women, for families, for kids, however, nothing for single men. And that's how we decided on March to focus on this topic and work in a long-term investigative report. So we partnered with anthropologists, with educators, with data analysts, filmmakers, photographers, interpreters, and of course with refugee and migrant communities in Greece. Also with activists, lawyers, and social workers. And what we are trying to accomplish here is to create a multimedia long-term investigative project that will cover holistically a topic. Now what we're planning to do in October, we are going to finish the Last in Line production, and we're going to start the educational part, where we're going to train 12 young students of journalism on how to cover migration, because we have seen amazing fake news on migration and refugee issues in Greece, especially with the latest events in Lesbos island. So what we're going to do is to teach these young journalists who have an interest to cover migration, to focus on migration, on how did our team work on this publication of Last in Line, how did we work with anthropologists, and not just doing what we called office journalism, going out on the field and work with the communities.
Are those people you're going to teach students at university, students at school? What's their profile?
It has just to have been, either graduates of journalism or students of journalism, regardless of the school.
Okay.
Based in Greece, because we are going to use Greek terminology, and we will focus on how Greek media cover or should not cover actually migration.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I hope it's really, it can cover the needs of the students, but also the immigration community, and shed some light for all of us, because the number is quite big. 40-something% of men from other cultures and countries is something that politicians and extremists use. And this is why it's very important to know how to present the information. I guess I'm talking as a simple citizen here. I would like to ask about the younger generation, because you all get back to it. And Stefan, you have beyond, of course, you're teaching architecture. It's not about journalism. It's something different. But how do you see this community of younger people within the arts and culture being interested in participation, and how do they, let's say, consume information? Because there's one thing about, we're talking about producing information and how this is going out, the channels, fake, not fake, trust. But how do you see those younger generations, being open to what's happening in society?
I think they are very open. The problem is to get to them, and also to adapt, and it's not always easy, especially from somebody of my generation. because it's you have to use all the channels. In some of them we are not yet good at, like for instance YouTube. I think for people of my generation, YouTube is, for instance, is more something like a playlist or something like that. And for them, it's really a knowledge instrument. It's more than entertainment, it's knowledge, and we'll have to use that. What I think is that you have to respect your audience. I mean, even if it's people from outside the profession or from arts, or if it's a student, it's I don't think you have to try to get down to any level. This is already disrespectful. I think you have to be very simple and to be seductive in an honest way. And I think that if you're in the visual fields, photographs, images, and so on are very good to attract. And then you can bring more serious stuff. And I think this is, I mean, it's a strategy. It's not a trick. It's a way of doing. It's like getting into maybe into a meal and having the hors d'oeuvre, the appetizers, and then get into more and more things, and to mix them. For instance, of course, we publish a lot of projects. So we publish beautiful houses. Sometimes there are villas, or sometimes they are very expensive things, sometimes sexy. We always try them to be serious. But I think you have to have that, and then from time to time you can regularly, actually not from time to time, put another article about things which are maybe not so sexy, but which are very important. But I think it's also good to choose your point of view. For instance, we had an article I love done by one of my colleagues of a Syrian refugee camp. I think it was in Jordania. He was there, and the reportage was made about this refugee camp as a city. Because these refugee camps really are cities with streets, with blocks, with buildings, with religious buildings, with the market. And even if they are walled cities, you look at the plans, sometimes they resemble cities from the Babylonian era, you know. And I think the moment to start to speak of them as another lens, another perspective, it gets very it gets into people. And I think also that it's very important to have, and I've seen that also at what my colleagues are doing in their platforms, to have this mix between the big scale event, and the story of some people, to get really into the little scale, the human scale, the personal story, and to bring them together, not to squeeze emotion out of the audience, but really to not remain into an abstract level, but to travel all the time into these scales and change also the perspective. And then I think that always when you're speaking about human stories, everybody reacts, including young people, and maybe especially young people. And then you can start to build up more critical thinking, starting from here, and getting it into more and more abstract stuff. But keeping this really like, I'm sorry, I like to eat a lot, so I'm always into these culinary metaphors, but to have this balance between the different tastes and the different spices, and heavy and light, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's actually quite, how can I say, it's giving us hope about this younger generation. And talking about the future, there's one thing you all mentioned about the funding models and the operational model of your institutions. We have two questions from our audience. One is about the non-profit model. I think our viewer maybe heard Fanis Kollias mention that Solomon exists as a non-profit. And I would like all of your opinions on this. Is this maybe for a funding scheme better? Is another type of company, or is maybe, and Fanis, I can start with you, the non-profit model of a company more open to a combined financial model?
If the primary source of this combination is grants, yeah, of course, non-profit is the best solution. However, considering that we're in Greece, let's remind you that Greeks hate two things: journalists and non-profits, and we are both. So it's very hard to actually manage this, this whole narrative in Greece, and especially right now with a government that supports this narrative of hating non-profits. So, in my opinion, I actually founded a non-profit because it was much more difficult to start something for profit in Greece, during accounting related. It was easier, it was cheaper, and that's why I started it. If you want to get rich, okay, don't start a non-profit. But it opens many doors to the international or local grants, and we have seen we have actually Greek media examples that actually create a different non-profit company in order to get funded. I'm not suggesting this. I mean, just do a non-profit from the beginning.
It has to do obviously, as Stefan said, with your vision and your goal. And I think, thank you, Fanis. Thank you for being so honest with us and our audience. I would like to go to Elvira's comment. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned something about private companies receiving funds from. Can you tell us a bit more? Because it is about a decision on a non-profit or for-profit model, and whether this gives you freedom to operate in a very difficult environment, as you've all described it. And this is the key, and it relates to employment, of course.
Yeah, so I'll just go back to what Fanis was talking about. You mentioned if you want to get rich. The whole time when we are talking about professional journalism and professional media, nobody's speaking about getting rich. Everyone is talking about surviving, the bare survival, especially now in the last 6 months. What lies ahead and in relation to this whole pandemic situation, I'm afraid, especially this region, which is the economy is poor and many businesses closed as everywhere else. But when you have a poor market and a small economy and an economy that is already being hurt by the lockdowns, then it's kind of it's no wonder to see all these media houses. I mean, not everyone is fired, of course, but there are a lot of media houses that ended their contract with some of the journalists and so on. You said you have and nobody's, we rarely hear people talking about freelancers. A lot of journalists are freelancers, and they're among the most endangered now in this whole situation. But to go back to what you asked me about private media getting funds, getting grants from international donors, it's just an opportunity that they're taking, and that is actually being offered to them. I'm not sure if it's their long-term survival model. Maybe yes, maybe no. But the fact that that even private media are sitting down, writing projects, thinking about different activities. Not a single project that I know is just that the donor gives you money to write stories and to do investigative work or do production. It's about something else. It's about some activities, either by usually it's doing some kind of round tables and different activities, the kind of, I would say, the usual things that we all need as a society. You have to have space to discuss, important topics such as we are doing right now. But this is being done. These activities and these projects are being implemented by the organizations that are kind of set that things like that as their mission, not by professional media that are trying to report on everyday things, on, you know, trying to hold governments accountable. When you pressure media outlets, media houses, and journalists by, you know, going to hold round tables and organize different activities, then that is kind of hurting their time that should be dedicated to them investigating and doing their jobs, you know, freely, you know. So if you are a journalist who's working, sorry, yeah.
It's a change of skill set that you're actually talking about.
Yeah, this is something that we are not noticing in a variety of media, not just the media that I mentioned in the beginning, the media that are set as products of all of these good examples. I'm talking about media like Centers for Investigative Journalism, and there's this Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, one of the biggest media organizations in the Western Balkans. So I'm talking about these kind of media that are issued, that by non-governmental organizations whose jobs are to kind of implement the project. So even the private media are but actually doing that. And there are, and I don't think it's a bad thing. It's on the opposite. I think it's a good thing that there are different donor funds available to private media to kind of maybe do something that they wouldn't do before, you know, maybe receive some additional funds to do field work that they are not doing, that wouldn't be doing otherwise, you know.
Yeah. So if I get this right, it is, you're saying that it's positive that the foundations or donors open a new kind of funding, but focused on the media work instead of a camouflaged funding, doing something else while being a media company, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that if you want to support the actual media production, then it should be very direct. I know it's very hard. It should be very direct support to actual field work or whatever, something like that. But I know it's not always easy, and obviously I'm not coming from these kind of circles of donors of the foundations that have the money. I don't know. Well, I can only guess what they want to see, you know. Mm-hmm. But if you are going to support, and there had been some, to some extent, had been some funds available for media production, which I see that it created in the last few years. It created some kind of diversity in media content, you know.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this. And Stefan, it is the most important part is, as you said, to survive. I mean, everyone said this, and Elvira just explained to us very openly how this can be done and supported. But what do you, how do you operate? Let's say, how do you think that it can help you being a nonprofit or and also in publishing house? And how do you see this functioning? And also in terms of having quality professionals, because you mentioned quite a few times the quality aspect of your work.
Actually, I totally agree with what Elvira and what Fanis said. So I think it really depends on what you want to do, and also maybe on the part of your activity that you think it's or that you believe it's better done by an NGO or by a firm. I think this is it entirely depends. I don't think that one model or the other is necessarily better per se. What I think, and I think that's something we haven't touched yet, is that in the end, we are in a kind of ecosystem of all these NGOs, companies, independent guys. And I mean, now I'm going really to talk into cliches, and I hate that, but you'll have to trust me. It's really about solidarity and cooperation. I think that if we work together, it's like a little bit like, I'm joking now, keeping the money in the family, you know. But seeing by family, the actual family of people doing things. And if you can help, I don't know, a photographer, which can be also not a very rich guy, and you can give him a commission instead of, I don't know, applying to some international database, or if you can collaborate with that or the other entity, I think it's better also for the work. And I think it's also better because we can help among ourselves. It's a kind of working solidarity. Maybe taking somebody in your space if you just have a free desk and so on. I've also seen I'm much more happier in the last years. Before, most of our projects were actually very pyramidal. So we started them, we had the initiative, and then we took maybe artists, maybe sociologists, and so on, and we included them in the team. And I'm much more happy now to start in a horizontal partnership, totally and on equal base. And then you see that actually you didn't ask us, but most of organizations I think are quite small. I don't think I'm mistaken. I don't think that neither Elvira nor Fanis, they are not working with 200 people, no. and so the moment it's like mathematics, a good way of doing mathematics. The moment you start cooperating, you can assemble quite large teams, but without having, if it's done in a very honest way, but without having to bother that you have to have a huge organization that you have to keep all the time, keep everybody busy and so on, and turn into some kind of mini trust or something like that. You can do it into this very honest and free type of collaboration with the one, with the other, maybe bringing free organizations together and things like that. I think this is really the moment, the most, I think the biggest mistake now, and I'm really not speaking, I hope in an idealistic way, I'm really trying to be reasonably pragmatic, is to think only in terms of competition. Because you are in competition for grants, you are in competition for funding and even more. But I think that we should think in these terms of cooperation and sharing, and this could be a way of not all drowning, you know, to keep the raft afloat instead of pushing the one and the other in the water. And I think this is both ethical but also extremely pragmatic. So I would recommend this as a strategy for absolutely everybody. Keep the money in the family and collaborate. I think this is the most difficult things in the Balkans. Yeah. Maybe Greece, I think from what I know, maybe this idea of solidarity is a little bit more developed in Greece, actually. But in countries which have gone through this totalitarian communist regimes, which were practically obliging collaboration and cooperation and everything, they tend to be, even 30 years after, extremely individualistic. And to bring, no, Elvira, am I mistaken? I think not.
You're totally right.
To bring, you bring three people together, then one wants to be boss, and the second one, he also wants to be boss, and then he found his own stuff. And I think that's, like I said, I'm speaking less for Greece, but for the other countries in Southeastern Europe, I think managing to come together would be the most important thing.
I have to admit that this is in our previous talks. Stefan, thank you so much for sharing this view. And in previous talks, quite a few speakers have told us that the COVID-19 crisis has accelerated certain processes. And I feel that we are actually experiencing this as we speak, accelerating the process of collaboration or cooperation, accelerating also some negative aspects of our lives. But I would like to close this session and thank you all very much for leaving it on a very positive note. A note about younger generations being open to change and us being also open to adapting. It has been really an honor having you on our virtual stage, and I really look forward to collaborating with you as best as we can between countries, between teams, and all keeping being independent. And I wish you all the best for now. Thank you for being with us. Thank you also, of course, to our production team behind this online event. And dear viewers, of course, thank you for your questions and also for being present. See you all in our next session on Tuesday, September 29th at 18 hours European Eastern Time, with a 7th talk on introducing the future of a sustainable network. This talk will launch the third and last cycle of the Unlearning talks, and will continue until October 1st. And so if what you heard today sounds interesting, I invite you to share your story by registering at our events page on the startgreece.net website. And until then, stay safe and join us on social media.